What happens when a billionaire CEO with a reputation as cold as his empire crosses paths with a struggling single mom from Brooklyn, and her chaos comes crashing, quite literally, into his perfectly controlled world? One spilled coffee, one curious little boy, and one connection no one saw coming. But behind every smile, there's a secret. Behind every glance, a past. And when the world starts watching, will love be enough to survive? If you think you know how this story ends, think again. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for the full story, because this is more than just a romance. It's a collision of two worlds you won't want to miss. The late afternoon sun filtered through the thinning autumn leaves of Central Park, casting dappled golden light over the quiet bench near the Bethesda fountain. The usual clamor of the city seemed to fade here. Maxwell Sterling sat alone, his expensive leather briefcase open beside him, a crisp stack of handwritten notes balanced on his knee. For once, he had left behind his laptop, his office, the constant stream of emails, and the unbearable hum of industry. He needed clarity. He always did when decisions of this magnitude loomed. He tapped the end of his pen on the edge of the paper, eyes narrowed, jaw tight. It was a merger proposal that could either transform Sterling Dynamics or bury it under waves of public scrutiny. Every word mattered. Then chaos. Out of nowhere, a blur of motion crashed into his legs. Whoa! Maxwell lurched forward as papers flew into the air like startled birds. His coffee toppled from the bench, splattering a brown, steaming arc across his pressed white shirt and tailored navy coat. The boy who had collided with him stumbled backward and fell onto the grass, giggling breathlessly. "Tag, I got you," the child shouted to someone behind him, then paused when he realized he'd hit a stranger. "Jesus Christ," Maxwell muttered under his breath, eyes wide with disbelief as he looked down at the mess. The front of his shirt was soaked. What the hell? Before he could gather his words, or his documents, a woman came rushing over the hillock, winded, hair in a loose bun, eyes darting wildly until they locked on the small figure in front of Maxwell. "Ethan," she called, breath-catching, "are you okay?" The boy nodded innocently, still on the ground, blinking up at the man he'd tackled. "I didn't mean to bump him, Mommy." Maxwell looked up, irritation sharpening his voice. "You need to watch him, "I'm so sorry," the woman cut in, her voice urgent, laced with genuine concern. She knelt to gather the papers that had fluttered across the grass. I didn't see where he ran. He usually stays close, I swear." Maxwell stood slowly, brushing coffee off his coat with little success. "These were important," he said flatly. She froze mid-reach, glancing up at him. Their eyes met, just a brief second, but enough for something subtle to pass between them. Her face was flushed from running, brows drawn in apology, but there was something striking behind the messiness. A softness, a strength. "I'm really sorry," she said again, quieter this time. "If there's anything I can do—" "No," Maxwell said sharply, then caught himself. He took a breath, exhaled slowly. "Just, it's fine." He looked down at the boy, who was now examining a blade of grass with great interest. "He's energetic," Maxwell added, less harsh now. "Yeah," she said with a breathless chuckle, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "That's one word for it." He crouched down and retrieved the last sheet of paper, now marked with a faint coffee ring. "Mommy, I tagged the man," Ethan said proudly. Maxwell raised an eyebrow. "You did, very effectively." "I'm Ethan," the boy added, oblivious to the tension. The woman stood, gently placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm Lily. Again, sorry for all this." Maxwell hesitated. His instinct told him to walk away, to forget the whole scene, but his gaze lingered a moment longer than it should have. "Maxwell," he said finally, "Sterling." Lily gave a polite nod. "Well, we'll get out of your way." As they turned to leave, Ethan waved cheerfully. "Bye, Mr. Maxwell." Maxwell blinked at the boy, then slowly looked down at his coffee-stained shirt. the wind tugging at the scattered pages still in his hand. He wasn't sure why, but something about that moment clung to him, like the faint smell of fall in the air, or the way Lily had looked at him, startled and unguarded. He watched them disappear into the crowd. And for the first time in a long time, Maxwell Sterling forgot about the merger. The apartment was small. Not cozy small, but the kind of cramped where every sound echoed a little too loudly, and the radiator hissed like it held a grudge. It sat on the third floor of an aging brownstone in Brooklyn, the stairs creaking with every step Lily Thompson took as she carried a bag of groceries in one hand and Ethan's backpack in the other. "Dinner's going to be fast and probably not exciting," she called out as Ethan darted inside ahead of her. "Mac and cheese?" he asked, hope blooming in his voice as he threw his little sneakers off in the hallway. She smiled wearily. "You know me too well." The living room was a mix of chaos and care. Stacks of books, Ethan's crayon drawings taped proudly to the walls, a second-hand couch with a faint tear in the cushion. On the windowsill, a struggling basil plant reached for the last rays of afternoon sun. Lily moved automatically, unpacking groceries, checking the overdue bills on the counter, wincing at the red-stamped envelope from Conneed. Rent was due next week. Her next paycheck wouldn't cover all of it, and tips at the cafe had been inconsistent lately, especially with the new manager cutting hours. But she didn't let any of that show on her face. "Wash your hands before dinner," she said over her shoulder. Ethan ran to the sink, singing a made-up song about soap and dragons. His laughter filled the space, and for a moment Lily allowed herself to pause. Watching him like that, carefree, happy, it made the struggle worth it. Every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every time she swallowed pride to make ends meet. She moved to the tiny table in the corner and lit the single bulb hanging overhead. The whole apartment had a faint smell of old wood and dish soap. A small frame sat beside the salt shaker, a picture of Lily holding baby Ethan in the hospital, both exhausted, both smiling. She sat down, elbows on the table, hands tangled in her hair for a moment before exhaling slowly. She had left Pennsylvania 5 years ago with nothing but a duffel bag, a sleeping baby, and a fractured heart. Travis had been charming once, until the charm curdled into anger, into lies, into bruises, some visible, some not. When he finally left for good, she didn't look back. Brooklyn was hard, but it was hers. A fresh start. A place where she could raise Ethan away from the shadows of who she'd been with. "Mommy," Ethan said, crawling into her lap with warm, sticky fingers. "You look tired." "I'm okay," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how lucky I am to have you." He giggled and leaned into her. "I'm lucky too. You're the best cooker and the best snuggler." Lily laughed softly. The weight of the day didn't go away, but for a moment it felt lighter. Tomorrow she'd be back behind the counter at the cafe, scrubbing espresso machines and smiling through rude customers. But tonight she had Ethan, a bowl of mac and cheese, a tiny apartment that felt like a fortress, even if it was barely held together. And somehow that was enough. The elevator opened with a soft chime, and Maxwell stepped into the penthouse like a man entering a museum, silent, composed, untouched by emotion. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering skyline of Manhattan, the city stretching endlessly beneath him like a kingdom he ruled but never belonged to. Everything inside the apartment was sleek, minimalist, and expensive. Slate-gray walls, custom Italian furniture, a wine fridge stocked but rarely used, not a single object out of place. It was the kind of space designed to impress, not to live in. He slipped off his coat and draped it over the back of a leather chair, then crossed to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of sparkling water, and stared blankly at the backsplash as the bubbles rose. His phone buzzed again. A flood of emails, meeting reminders, a few lingering messages from the PR team about the fallout from the political investor scandal. Maxwell had declined funding from Senator Howard Keene, a move that was both principled and polarizing. Keene's team had leaked that Maxwell was emotionally volatile, unreliable, and disconnected from the real world. The media, hungry for any angle, had latched onto it like wolves. Photos of Maxwell leaving board meetings with a stern face. Headlines calling him the Ice King of Silicon Alley. Rumors of staff turnover. Cold, unapproachable, unfeeling. Maxwell had said nothing. He always let silence speak for him. He took a long sip of the water, then opened his laptop on the island counter. A spreadsheet greeted him, full of metrics, timelines, product launch dates. He scrolled. Numbers, projections, risks, nothing human. Behind him, the room remained still. No music, no laughter, no signs of life beyond his own shadow. He paused. For some reason, his mind drifted, not to the boardroom, not to the press, but to the little boy with tousled hair and grass stains on his jeans. I tagged the man. And the woman Lily. The way she'd looked at him, worried but not intimidated, tired but not bitter. He blinked the image away, scolding himself for the distraction. He had no time for sentiment, no room for softness. Feelings didn't belong in his world. They got people hurt, got companies burned, got futures undone. Still, as he stared at the city lights beyond the glass, his reflection stared back, immaculate, controlled, and completely alone. The cafe was a narrow little spot tucked between a laundromat and a vintage bookstore on a quieter stretch of Brooklyn's 7th Avenue. It smelled like roasted espresso beans, vanilla syrup, and burnt toast. Inside, worn wooden tables and mismatched chairs gave it a warm, lived-in charm that clashed spectacularly with the man who walked in that morning. Maxwell Sterling stood just inside the doorway, scanning the chalkboard menu with all the enthusiasm of someone reading terms and conditions. He was overdressed for the place, charcoal gray coat, crisp shirt, polished shoes that had never touched a puddle. His presence shifted the energy in the room. Conversations dimmed. Eyes drifted. He approached the counter without looking at the pastries. Large black coffee. No sugar, no milk, he said, voice clipped. To go. Behind the counter, Lily was busy steaming milk for another order. She turned at the voice and froze. He looked up at the same moment. Recognition sparked. Lily's brows lifted slightly. You. Maxwell narrowed his eyes. You work here. Wow, you're good at picking up patterns. He didn't smile. Your son ran me over. You were sitting in the middle of a park, she replied, reaching for a cup. Not exactly a high-risk zone. He watched her write on the side of the cup, quick and efficient. I hope your notes survived the coffee, she added, more gently this time. They didn't. Well, good thing you look like the type who memorizes everything. She handed him the cup. Their fingers brushed for a fraction of a second. At that moment, a voice called out cheerfully from the corner of the cafe. Mommy, look, it's the guy with the white shirt. Ethan was sitting at a small table by the window with a coloring book and a juice box. He grinned and waved wildly at Maxwell. Maxwell blinked. White shirt. You were wearing one when he took you down, Lily said with a smirk. Ethan jumped off his chair and jogged over, beaming. Hi, Mr. Coffee Guy. Maxwell looked down at him, expression unreadable. Do you live here now? Ethan asked innocently. You should stay, we have muffins. Lily looked mortified. Ethan. Maxwell, to her astonishment, let out a faint laugh. It was small, barely more than a breath, but real. I don't live here, he said, but the muffins are tempting. From the other side of the cafe, Maxwell's assistant, who had just walked in behind him, stared in disbelief. It wasn't the order that surprised her. It was the smile. She'd never seen it before. Over the next few days, Maxwell found himself returning to the cafe. He told himself it was for the coffee, strong, dark, exactly how he liked it. Or maybe it was the quiet atmosphere, the rare lack of corporate pretense. He certainly didn't tell himself it had anything to do with the woman behind the counter or the small boy with crayon-stained fingers who always seemed to be there. "Back again?" Lily asked on the third morning, raising an eyebrow as she wiped down the counter. Maxwell glanced at her, then away. "Apparently, your shop is on the way to a client meeting." "You said that yesterday." "Clients can be persistent." From the corner of the cafe, Ethan was peeking over the edge of his table, eyes twinkling. "Hi, Mr. Coffee Guy," he called, grinning. "Guess what? I drew a dinosaur that can fly." Maxwell looked toward him, blinking like someone caught in unfamiliar territory. "Did you?" he asked cautiously. "Yeah, want to see." Ethan hopped down from his chair, darted over, and proudly held up a wrinkled page with a vaguely dinosaur-shaped creature soaring above a volcano. Maxwell studied it, expression unusually soft. "Impressive wingspan," he said. "Very aerodynamic." Ethan beamed. "Mom says you're important. Are you a president?" Maxwell hesitated. "Not exactly." "He's a CEO," Lily said dryly from the espresso machine. "What's that?" Ethan asked. Maxwell crouched slightly, lowering himself to Ethan's level. "It's like being the captain of a very big ship, but instead of water, the ship is made of numbers and decisions." Ethan made a face. "That sounds boring." Maxwell's lips twitched. "It usually is." Ethan leaned in, whispering with exaggerated secrecy. "You should draw more dinosaurs. It helps." Maxwell glanced up at Lily, who was watching the exchange with folded arms and a hidden smile. He stood again, brushing imaginary dust from his coat. "I'll keep that in mind." The visits continued. Not every day, but often enough that Lily started setting aside his order before he arrived. And always, without fail, Ethan would find his way into the conversation. Maxwell didn't quite know how to handle it. He was used to adults, calculated, transactional, rarely sincere. But Ethan asked questions without a filter, made observations without guile, and laughed like nothing in the world could touch him. It was disarming, unsettling, and oddly comforting. One morning, after Ethan had run back to his table with a muffin half the size of his head, Maxwell found himself staring into his coffee, frowning slightly. "He likes you," Lily said quietly, leaning on the counter. "He shouldn't," Maxwell replied. "Why not?" "Because I don't know how to like people back." Lily didn't laugh. She didn't flinch. She just looked at him and said, "Maybe that's why he does." Maxwell didn't have a response. But he came back the next day. It started with another cup of coffee and a very enthusiastic 5-year-old. Maxwell had just received his usual order: black, no sugar, no cream, when Ethan, in his rush to show off a freshly collected pinecone, collided into him with the force of a tiny hurricane. The cup tipped. The coffee spilled. Again. Maxwell froze, the liquid seeping into the front of his suit jacket like some cruel cosmic joke. Ethan gasped, his little face twisting with horror. "Oh no," he whispered, looking up at Maxwell with wide, terrified eyes. "Not again." Lily darted over from behind the counter. "Ethan." "I'm sorry," he blurted. "I didn't mean." Maxwell looked down at the dark stain creeping across the fabric of his coat. He let out a breath, long and measured, like a man standing on the edge of a very steep cliff. Then, to everyone's shock, including his own, he said, "All right, that's it. I surrender." Ethan blinked. "Huh. This is the second time your son has launched an attack on me via coffee. I think we should call a truce. Over food." Lily stared. "Wait, you're asking us to lunch?" "I'm buying," he added, "before your child moves on to targeting pastries." They ended up at a small diner a few blocks away. Vinyl booths, laminated menus, the smell of grease and pancakes. It was, in many ways, the last place on earth Maxwell Sterling belonged. He sat across from Lily and Ethan, visibly uncomfortable, shoulders stiff, glancing warily at the ketchup bottle as though it might explode. Lily smirked behind her water glass. "You look like you're waiting for a board meeting." "I don't go to many diners," he said flatly, scanning the menu like it was written in another language. "What is a Monte Cristo?" "A sandwich that doesn't take itself too seriously," she replied. Ethan was busy coloring the placemat with stubby crayons. "I want pancakes, with smiley faces." "That's not on the menu," Lily said. "Doesn't mean it's impossible," Maxwell murmured, then looked at the waitress. "He'll have pancakes with smiley faces." Lily blinked. "You don't have to." Maxwell cut her off almost gently. "He likes them." A few awkward beats passed. Lily stirred her iced tea. Maxwell checked his phone, then put it away almost immediately. Silence stretched, but not the painful kind, just uncertain. "So," Lily finally said, "what exactly does a CEO do all day?" Maxwell lifted an eyebrow. "You want the honest version or the polished one?" "Give me the honest one. I spend half my day fixing problems I didn't create, and the other half convincing people I know what I'm doing." Lily laughed, actually laughed. "Sounds a lot like being a single mom." Ethan, overhearing, nodded solemnly. "Mommy says being a grown-up is just doing stuff you're tired of doing." Maxwell cracked a smile. "She's not wrong." The food arrived. Ethan's pancakes had a syrupy grin and two blueberry eyes. He clapped his hands in delight. And somehow, between bites of lukewarm fries and dry diner coffee, the walls between them began to drop, brick by awkward brick. Lily told a story about a customer who ordered a decaf espresso with extra caffeine, and Maxwell shared how he once gave a keynote speech with his fly open. Ethan interrupted every 5 minutes with random facts about dinosaurs. Maxwell laughed more than he had in months, maybe years. It wasn't a perfect lunch, but for all its messiness and unexpected turns, it felt real. And for Maxwell Sterling, that was terrifying and strangely wonderful. The cafe was quiet during the mid-afternoon lull, that in-between hour where the morning rush had long faded and the evening crowd hadn't yet begun to trickle in. Lily was wiping down the counter when her coworker, Jenna, leaned over from the pastry case with a conspiratorial smirk. "So," Jenna said, drawing out the word like it held all the gossip in the world, "are you gonna tell me what's up with Mr. Tall, dark, and drenched?" Lily blinked. "Excuse me." Jenna nodded toward the door Maxwell had exited from barely 15 minutes ago. "The guy in the tailored coat who keeps showing up looking like he owns half of Manhattan and drinks motor oil for breakfast. That one." Lily rolled her eyes and tossed her rag into the sink. "He's just a customer." "A customer who's now had lunch with you and your kid." Jenna raised an eyebrow and smiled. "I saw it. It was weird." "He smiled at pancakes, not me," Lily said, laughing lightly but not quite meeting her friend's eyes. "Besides, he's not my type." "Oh yeah, what's your type again?" "Broke, angry, and allergic to diapers." The air changed just slightly. Lily's smile tightened, her eyes falling to the counter. Jenna instantly softened. "Hey, sorry, that was." "No, it's fine." Lily reached for a tray of mugs to restock. "You're not wrong." She carried the tray to the shelves in the back, and Jenna followed, quieter now. "I was in school when I met him," Lily said after a moment, voice low. "NYU, full ride, graphic design. I had big plans, magazines, animation studios, book covers. Stuff I loved, you know." Jenna nodded slowly, sensing the shift. "And then I got pregnant." Lily gave a soft, breathless laugh. "Everything changed. Suddenly it was diapers and doctor visits and juggling shifts at diners. Travis, he wasn't built for that kind of life, or maybe he just didn't want to be." She paused, resting a mug on the shelf. "He left when Ethan was barely 6 months old, didn't even leave a note, just disappeared, which honestly might have been the kindest thing he ever did." Jenna leaned against the wall, arms folded. "I had no idea you were on a scholarship." Dean list every semester, Lily said, almost wistfully. I still dream about it sometimes. That life. The version of me that could have existed. But you've got Ethan, Jenna said gently. Lily smiled again, this time softer, more real. Yeah, I wouldn't trade him for 1,000 degrees. Still, Jenna added, bumping her shoulder playfully, you ever think about going back, doing art again? Sometimes, Lily admitted, but dreams don't always survive rent. They stood in silence for a moment, just the low hum of the espresso machine filling the space. Lily reached for the last mug and set it in place. Anyway, she said, clearing her throat, Maxwell Sterling, whatever his deal is, he's just a customer. A very expensive suit with probably 5 phones and no time for messy lives like mine. Jenna gave her a knowing look. Funny, he didn't look like he wanted to leave today. Lily turned away, busying herself with the register. Doesn't mean he should stay. But later that night, when she was tucking Ethan into bed and the apartment was quiet, Lily sat at the edge of her mattress, pulled out an old sketchpad from under the bed, and opened to a blank page. She stared at it for a long time before finally picking up a pencil. The boardroom at Sterling Dynamics was a sleek, glass-encased monument to control. Everything gleamed: chrome chairs, white marble table, the touchscreens embedded seamlessly into the walls. It was the kind of place where silence was power and precision was everything. Maxwell sat at the head of the table, flanked by department heads and VPs, all mid-discussion about projections for the upcoming product launch. Numbers filled the screen at the front of the room. Graphs, charts, talking points. His assistant leaned in, whispering a reminder about a Q4 investor meeting that needed to be rescheduled. He nodded distantly. But his mind wasn't in the room. It hadn't been for days. And with an aggressive marketing push, we're estimating a 17% increase in adoption rates. Mr. Sterling, sir. Maxwell blinked. Heads were turning. People were waiting. He realized someone had just asked him a question. Yes, he said automatically, voice cool and even. Run the projections both ways, conservative and aggressive. I want to see the delta. The room murmured agreement, but Maxwell could see the flicker of confusion on his CFO's face. He never zoned out. He didn't miss beats. Until now. He stared at the numbers on the screen, but all he could see was a different image. A little boy with syrup on his cheeks, proudly holding up a drawing of a rocket ship shaped like a dinosaur. A woman laughing behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair in a messy bun. The clink of ceramic mugs, crayons scattered on a table. That world had color. This room, his empire, was grayscale. What is happening to me? Maxwell excused himself halfway through the meeting, citing a call. He didn't take one. He stood in his office instead, staring out over Manhattan from behind the glass, arms folded tightly across his chest. He was used to order, to logic, to people wanting something from him. Clients, investors, reporters, board members, they all had a purpose. But Lily didn't ask for anything. Ethan didn't need anything from him except maybe a smile, a name for his dinosaur, a high five for a pancake victory. And somehow that stuck. Why do I remember the sound of that kid, laughing more than I remember the last 3 product briefs? He'd built his life like a fortress, walls high, gates locked. There was safety in solitude, in predictability, in keeping the world just far enough away to never disappoint him. But lately, the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt empty. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly, and stared at his own reflection in the glass. Maybe, just maybe, something in him was cracking. And maybe it wasn't such a bad thing. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees in Prospect Park, casting long golden streaks across the path. The air was crisp, hinting at the slow creep of winter. Lily sat on a weathered bench with a paper coffee cup cradled between her palms, the steam curling up and vanishing into the breeze. Next to her, Maxwell sat unusually relaxed, his coat unbuttoned, tie loosened slightly. Ethan was a few yards away, chasing squirrels and narrating his imaginary quest to anyone who would listen. Lily glanced over at Maxwell. "I still can't believe you agreed to a walk in the park. This doesn't exactly scream CEO behavior." He smirked. "I thought I'd try something reckless. You know, fresh air, grass, spontaneous rodent encounters." She laughed, dangerous. A beat passed, then another. The air between them felt still but not uncomfortable. "He makes it look so easy," Lily said suddenly, nodding toward Ethan. "Just running, laughing, not a care in the world." "He's a good kid," Maxwell said, watching the boy with something soft in his eyes. "He is," her voice dropped slightly. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough, or too much, or the wrong things entirely." Maxwell looked at her. "You seem like a good mother." "Thanks," she replied, then gave a hollow laugh. "Most days I feel like I'm just surviving. Wake up early, get him dressed, drop him off, clock in, clock out, get groceries, pay what bills I can. Try to be patient. Try not to cry. Hope he never sees how tired I am." He didn't interrupt, just listened. "I didn't plan this life," she added quietly, "but it's mine, and I love him more than anything. I just wish I could give him more." Maxwell was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I know something about pressure." She turned to him. "Oh yeah. My parents run a multi-billion-dollar financial firm. Global reach. Old money, old rules. My entire childhood was one long training seminar on how to become them." She raised an eyebrow. "Sounds suffocating." "It was." His jaw tightened slightly. "I went to all the right schools, wore all the right clothes, said all the right things, but I never wanted their world, so I built my own. And they resented you for it." "They still do." He gave a humorless smile. "To them, I'm a disappointment with too much technology and not enough legacy." Lily looked at him for a moment, something new flickering in her expression. "So, you built a whole empire just to piss off your parents?" "That wasn't the plan," he said, "but I'm not unhappy with the side effect." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You really are a control freak, huh?" "Completely." Ethan came running back then, breathless and smiling. "Mommy, I named a squirrel Kevin." Lily smiled, reaching out to brush his hair back. "That's a very professional name." Maxwell looked at her hand, how gently it moved, and felt something tug in his chest. Maybe this wasn't part of his plan. But maybe plans weren't everything. It started with a 10-second clip. Grainy, shaky, but clear enough. Maxwell Sterling, clean-cut, notoriously private and infamously stone-faced, leaning across a cafe counter to hand a napkin to a laughing woman with a messy bun. A little boy in a dinosaur hoodie was tugging at his sleeve, and Maxwell bent down to say something, his expression softer than anyone had ever seen it. The caption read, "Is that Maxwell Sterling flirting in Brooklyn with a single mom?" Coffee date Sterling spotted. It hit the internet like wildfire. By noon, it was trending. By 3 p.m., it had been picked up by at least 3 gossip sites and one Tech Insider blog that dubbed it the Latte Affair. The office at Sterling Dynamics was in chaos. Maxwell stood in the glass-walled conference room, jaw clenched, staring at the video looping silently on a screen someone had so helpfully connected to the projector. His PR director was talking, something about damage control, a press statement, spinning it as a human moment to make him more relatable to shareholders. He wasn't listening. "I want it gone," Maxwell said, voice like ice. "You can't scrub the internet," the PR director said gently. "And honestly, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's a distraction. It's a humanizing distraction." Maxwell's eyes narrowed. "Do I look like I want to be humanized?" The room fell quiet. His assistant cleared her throat. "Sir, your mother on line 2." "Of course she was." He walked out without another word, retreating to his office and closing the door behind him. The call connected before he could even sit. Grace Sterling's voice came sharp and cool through the speaker. "Maxwell, what the hell is going on?" "Good afternoon to you too, Mother. I had two senators call me this morning. One asked if you were having a breakdown. The other offered to send his PR team." "It was coffee." "Coffee?" she echoed with a huff. "With a woman who works in a cafe and a child who isn't yours. In Brooklyn, no less." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Why does it matter?" "Because perception matters," she snapped. "Because you're the face of an empire and you don't get the luxury of slipping. Especially not for some barista with a charming smile and a messy life. Her name is Lily." "Well, congratulations," Grace said, her voice laced with acid. "You've given the press something to tear apart, and don't think the board isn't watching." He paused, something about the way she said it. "You talked to the board." There was silence on the other end. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "I own the company, Mother." "You represent more than yourself," she said, icily composed again. "You always have." He ended the call without another word, then sat in the darkening quiet of his office, staring at the paused frame of the video on his monitor, Lily mid-laugh, Ethan tugging at his hand, his own face looking almost unrecognizable. Soft, unarmored, vulnerable. And for the first time, Maxwell didn't know if that terrified him or felt like freedom. The cafe was unusually quiet that morning, the soft clinking of cups and the low hum of conversation a muted backdrop to Lily's movements behind the counter. She worked mechanically, grinding beans, steaming milk, smiling on cue, each task done by muscle memory. But her thoughts were elsewhere. She'd seen it that morning, staring back at her from the cracked screen of her phone. Sterling family sources concerned over CEO's distraction. Mystery woman labeled a PR risk. The article hadn't used her name, but it didn't have to. There was a blurry photo of her wiping a table, a sharper one of her and Maxwell seated at the park. Ethan's face had been blurred, thank God, but the damage was done. An insider close to Grace Sterling confirms the family is urging Maxwell to disengage from the relationship, citing reputational concerns and professional risk. Lily had read the whole thing twice, and each word felt like a fresh slap. Disengage. PR risk. Mystery woman. She didn't need to be fluent in corporate code to understand what it meant. She was the mess. She was the problem. And he hadn't even called. Across town, in a penthouse where everything was too polished and too quiet, Maxwell stood facing the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped behind his back. His mother sat behind him, perfectly composed in a tailored ivory suit, one leg crossed over the other, a teacup balanced delicately in her hand like it was part of her anatomy. "I'm not going to repeat myself," Grace said. "This ends now." Maxwell didn't turn. "You had no right to speak to the board." "I had every right," she replied coldly. "As a founder, as a Sterling." "She's not a scandal." "She's beneath you," Grace snapped, her calm cracking just enough to show the steel beneath. "A single mother working in a coffee shop. The press is eating it up. Your name is being dragged through the mud, our name, Maxwell." "She's not the one doing the dragging." Grace rose to her feet, placing the teacup down with a click. "You've worked too hard, come too far, to throw it away over emotional charity." Maxwell's shoulders stiffened. "That's what you think this is." "I think you're lonely," she said, more gently now. "And lonely people make sentimental mistakes." He turned to face her, his jaw tight. "I'd rather be lonely with her than hollow with you." Her expression didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. "Then be prepared to watch everything you've built crack beneath you." She left without another word. And when Maxwell finally reached for his phone to call Lily, when he rehearsed what he'd say, how he'd explain, he was already too late. Because Lily had already seen the article. She'd already read every quote. So when his call came, she stared at the screen as it rang in her hand. And didn't pick up. The days blurred into one another after that. Lily didn't return Maxwell's calls. She didn't reply to his texts, though she read every one of them, quick, short messages that tried too hard not to sound like apologies. "Can we talk? I didn't say those things. Please don't believe the press." But she couldn't pretend it didn't hurt. Seeing her name twisted into a liability, her life reduced to tabloid fodder, Ethan's very existence used as a headline hook, it was more than she could stomach. And what cut deeper was knowing Grace Sterling had said those things, and Maxwell hadn't stopped her soon enough. So she pulled away. The next time he came into the cafe, she wasn't there. Jenna told him Lily was on break when she was. He left without ordering anything. Then he stopped coming altogether. Lily told herself it was for the best. She threw herself back into routine. Early mornings, long shifts, grocery lists, laundry nights. She picked up extra hours, took Ethan to the library, cleaned the apartment like it would somehow scrub away the weight of disappointment clinging to her chest. But even with all the effort, the ache lingered. She missed the way Ethan lit up when Maxwell walked in, missed the cautious banter, the strange comfort of someone else listening, really listening. She missed him more than she wanted to admit. Ethan noticed. "Is Mr. Maxwell on vacation?" he asked one evening, stirring his spaghetti absent-mindedly. Lily paused mid-bite. "No, baby, he's just busy." Ethan frowned, "But he always comes for coffee." "Not anymore." "Did he get tired of us?" The question hit her harder than she expected. She reached across the table, brushing his curls back gently. "No, sometimes grown-ups just have to take care of other things. That's all." Ethan pushed a meatball around his plate. "I liked when he came. He didn't laugh at my drawings." "I like your drawings," she said softly. "I know, but you're supposed to like them. He didn't have to." Lily blinked back, the sting in her eyes. That night, after Ethan fell asleep with his arms around his stuffed dinosaur, she stood by the kitchen sink, hands resting on the edge, staring out into the Brooklyn night. The lights outside flickered like stars trying to break through a storm. Maybe Maxwell had meant every kind word. Maybe he hadn't said what the articles claimed. Maybe. But Lily had learned the hard way that love, if it was even that, wasn't always enough to outweigh reality. And reality was, their lives didn't belong in the same world. So she let the silence stay. It was just after 5 in the evening when the cafe door chimed open. Lily looked up from wiping the espresso machine, expecting another last-minute commuter grabbing a to-go cup before the dinner rush. But instead, standing in the doorway in a long dark coat, looking slightly out of place beneath the string lights and chalkboard menus, was Maxwell Sterling. She froze. Their eyes met. For a second the air shifted, quiet, heavy, suspended like a held breath. Maxwell stepped inside slowly, as if uncertain whether he had the right to be there anymore. His coat was damp from the drizzle outside, hair tousled from the wind. No assistant, no polished entourage, no tailored confidence. Just him. Jenna glanced at Lily from across the counter but said nothing. She turned away, giving them space. Lily straightened. "You're a long way from your empire." "I've been farther," he said quietly. "This is the only place I wanted to be." She crossed her arms. "I thought I made it pretty clear." "You did," he replied. "I just wasn't ready to listen." Lily sighed, glancing around the cafe to avoid his eyes. "You shouldn't be here, Maxwell. It's messy. I'm messy. Your world doesn't want people like me in it." "That's not true," he said, stepping closer. "They don't want you in it. There's a difference. You let them speak for you." "I know," he said, voice low, "and I regret it more than I can say." She looked at him, really looked at him, and he looked different. Not just tired, but open in a way she hadn't seen before. Less CEO, more man. I didn't ask you for anything, she whispered. I never wanted your world, I thought maybe you wanted this one for a little while. I did, he said, I do. She shook her head. Maxwell, you come in here and the press goes crazy. Your mother tries to erase me. My son ends up in gossip blogs. I can't afford that kind of chaos. He hesitated. Then quietly, neither can I, but I'd rather deal with chaos than go back to that silence. That stopped her. Lily swallowed, fingers tightening on the edge of the counter. She wanted to stay firm, to tell him it wasn't enough. That wanting wasn't the same as choosing. But her heart, traitorous, hopeful, stirred. From the back corner, Ethan's coloring book lay open on a table. One of his drawings peeked out, 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall one, a short one, and a little one with spiky hair and a giant smile. Lily looked down. Her voice was steady but softer now. You don't get to walk back in and fix things with a speech. I'm not here to fix anything, Maxwell said. I'm here because I can't pretend none of it meant something. Silence fell between them again. Then quietly Lily said, we close at 6. He nodded once, I'll wait. She turned away, heart pounding, hands trembling just slightly, because she wasn't ready to forgive him. But maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to lose him either. It started with a knock on the apartment door, sharp, deliberate, and too confident to be friendly. Lily wiped her hands on a dish towel, frowning as she crossed the small living room. Ethan was in the corner, humming to himself, building a castle out of mismatched Lego bricks. She opened the door and froze. Standing in the dim hallway, wearing a smug, crooked smile and a cheap leather jacket, was Travis Miller, her ex-husband. Hey, Lil, he said, like he hadn't vanished from their lives 5 years ago, like he hadn't left her broken and alone with a 6-month-old baby and a rent bill she couldn't cover. You look good. She didn't answer. He stepped forward, but she blocked the doorway. What do you want? Travis held up his hands. Easy, I just wanted to see my kid. That a crime now? You haven't called, haven't written, haven't sent a single damn birthday card, and now you want to see him. He shrugged as if she was making a big deal out of nothing. People change. I've been thinking a lot lately, regretting stuff, thought maybe it was time to make things right. Her eyes narrowed. How did you find us? Travis smiled again, slower this time. You'd be surprised what the internet can tell you, especially when your name starts showing up next to a millionaire in the tabloids. Lily's stomach dropped. There it was, the truth. This isn't about Ethan, she said, voice flat. Oh, come on, he gave a mock-offended laugh. I have a right to see my son, don't I? Don't say son like you ever acted like a father. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Look, I get it. You've moved up in the world. Fancy boyfriend, headlines, attention must be nice. But that kind of spotlight, dangerous. You really think people won't start asking questions about where Ethan's real father is? Her blood went cold. I've got friends, Travis continued. Legal advice. And if I wanted to, I could file for custody, joint at least. Might even win, considering the chaos you've dragged him into. You're threatening me, Lily said, voice shaking but rising. I'm offering you a chance to cooperate, he said with a smirk. We could work something out. Maybe I don't make a fuss. Maybe you slip me a little thank you now and then, quietly, and I disappear again. She stared at him, fury building beneath her skin. Then slowly she stepped back and slammed the door in his face. Ethan looked up from the floor. Mommy. Lily knelt down, gathering him into her arms. Her voice was steady, but her heart was racing. It's okay, baby, just someone who doesn't belong here. But in her mind, the storm had already begun. She knew Travis. He wouldn't disappear quietly. He'd smelled money. And now he wanted blood. The envelope was thick. Lily found it stuffed into her mailbox late one afternoon, nestled between an overdue electric bill and a grocery store flyer. Her name was printed in bold, legal type. No return address, just the cold stamp of the family court system. She stood frozen in the stairwell, fingers trembling as she slid a nail beneath the seal and unfolded the papers. Petition for joint custody. Travis Miller v. Lily Thompson. Her legs nearly gave out. She sat on the stairs, paper rustling in her lap, breath coming short and shallow. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon, each line hitting harder than the last. Unstable home environment. Lack of financial security. Exposure to unwanted media attention. Emotional manipulation via high-profile romantic involvement. It was all there, every dagger, every lie. And worst of all, Ethan's name, written over and over. That night, Lily sat at the kitchen table long after Ethan had gone to sleep, the court summons beside her untouched bowl of soup. She stared at it, numb. Her phone buzzed. Maxwell Sterling. She hesitated, then answered. "I need to see you," she said quietly. 10 minutes later, he was there. She opened the door and let him in without a word. He stepped inside, took one look at her face, and didn't ask anything until they were sitting across from each other at the table. She slid the papers toward him. He read them silently, jaw tightening. "Travis," he muttered. "He's not doing this for Ethan," Lily said. "He's doing it because he wants money, because he saw me on the news next to you." Maxwell's voice was cold steel. "He's trying to extort you through your child." She nodded, staring down at her hands. "I can't afford a lawyer, not one who can beat this. He has people advising him. He's got angles." "I'll cover it," Maxwell said without hesitation. "I know a firm that's handled family law at the highest level, discreet, brutal." Lily looked up sharply. "No." "Lily." "No," she said again, firmer this time. "I appreciate it, but I can't take your money. If this goes public, and it will, I can't have anyone thinking I'm using you." His brows pulled together. "Who cares what they think?" "I do," she snapped. "Because it's not just about me anymore. If I lose this case, I lose my son. And if a judge thinks I'm wrapped up in some wealthy benefactor situation, it could backfire. You know it could." Maxwell leaned back, jaw clenched. "So you'd rather fight this alone?" "I'd rather fight it clean," she said, "even if that means I lose." The silence between them was heavy. Maxwell stood, raking a hand through his hair. "You're not going to lose." "You can't promise that." "No," he agreed, "but I can do something about it." She looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. He just picked up the papers, glanced over them again, and tucked them back into the envelope. Then he looked at her, voice low but certain. "I won't interfere, not openly, but I'm not walking away either." And then he left. Lily sat alone in the quiet hum of the apartment, equal parts afraid and grateful, not knowing what Maxwell had just decided to do behind the scenes. But whatever it was, it had already begun. The courthouse smelled like old paper and nerves. Lily sat stiffly on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, her hands twisting in her lap. She wore the only blazer she owned, a plain navy one, slightly faded at the elbows, and tried to keep her breathing steady. Her heart hadn't stopped pounding since the moment she stepped through the heavy double doors that morning. Travis was already inside. She'd seen him earlier, walking through the hall with an expensive-looking suit and a smug smile, flanked by a slick, fast-talking attorney with a Bluetooth in one ear and two white teeth. It was clear. He'd come prepared. And worse, he'd come for blood. Her own court-appointed lawyer, a tired woman named Kelly who had 3 other cases that morning, was reviewing paperwork beside her, mumbling something about custody precedent and character affidavits. Lily nodded, but her mind was a fog. She could barely focus. Every part of her body buzzed with fear. She kept thinking of Ethan. The knock on the courtroom door startled her. A bailiff poked his head out, Thompson v. Miller, you're up. Lily stood on shaky legs. But just as she was about to step forward, another voice interrupted. "Excuse me," a tall man in a tailored charcoal suit said, striding toward them. "Lily Thompson." She turned, yes. He extended a hand, calm and confident. "I'm Daniel Grayson. I'll be representing you." Lily blinked. I already have representation, Kelly, the court-appointed lawyer, was already backing away, eyes wide. "Mr. Grayson, from Grayson and Patel." Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you for holding the file. I'll take it from here." Lily stared at him, completely thrown. "I don't understand." Daniel leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Let's just say, a concerned party retained us on your behalf, fully confidential, no strings attached. My only job today is to win this case for you and for your son." She hesitated, "But I didn't hire anyone." "You didn't have to." Before she could ask more, the bailiff cleared his throat. "We need to proceed." Daniel gave her a reassuring smile. "Just follow my lead." Inside the courtroom, Travis smirked as Lily walked in, until he saw Daniel Grayson trailing behind her. His attorney faltered slightly. "Your Honor," Daniel said smoothly as they approached the bench. "Daniel Grayson, representing Ms. Thompson. We're ready to proceed." The judge blinked in surprise. "You're Grayson of Grayson and Patel." "Yes, Your Honor." Lily took her seat, still in disbelief. As proceedings began, Travis's side went on the offensive, claiming Lily provided an unstable home, that her recent involvement in public gossip had compromised her ability to provide a safe, private environment for Ethan. They made veiled jabs about her finances, her job, her character. But Daniel dismantled each argument with precision and calm. He submitted clean records of Lily's rent payments, testimonials from neighbors and coworkers, Ethan's school reports, and even a quiet statement from a child psychologist who had evaluated Ethan informally, proving that the boy was safe, happy, and thriving. At one point, when Travis's lawyer tried to introduce a magazine article about Lily and Maxwell, Daniel simply raised an eyebrow. "Tabloid speculation has no bearing in this court, Your Honor," he said. "And if the petitioner's legal strategy relies on gossip columns, I suggest we move for dismissal." Travis's confidence began to unravel. And Lily, sitting quietly beside the man she'd never met before today, realized she might actually have a chance. Someone had given her a fighting shot. And deep down, she already knew who. The courthouse hallway had emptied out by late afternoon, leaving only the echo of distant footsteps and the hum of vending machines. Lily sat alone on a bench near the window, the adrenaline slowly fading from her system, replaced by a tidal wave of exhaustion and something deeper. Hope. The hearing had gone better than she ever dared imagine. Daniel Grayson had been unstoppable, calm, sharp, respectful, the kind of lawyer who turned chaos into clarity. And through it all, Lily had felt, maybe for the first time in years, that someone was fighting for her, not against her. She still didn't know how it had happened, or why. But part of her already knew the truth. As she walked out of the building, Daniel caught up with her just outside the stone steps. "Ms. Thompson," he said gently, "I just wanted to check in before I go. You handled yourself incredibly well today." "Thank you," she said, clutching her coat tighter against the wind. "You saved us." "I was just doing my job," he said with a soft smile. "But if I may, there are very few clients I've represented with this much on the line and this much integrity." She hesitated, then asked, voice quiet, "Was it him?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He simply reached into his coat pocket and handed her a folded envelope. "No name," he said, "but I think you'll figure it out." Lily opened it slowly. Inside was a note, brief, handwritten in a neat, familiar script. "No one should have to fight alone, M." That was all. Her breath caught in her throat. Tears welled up without warning, hot, quiet, unstoppable. She turned slightly, trying to shield her face from the crowd, but Daniel had already stepped away, giving her space. She stood there on the courthouse steps, clinging to the note like it was the last solid thing in the world. And for the first time in so long, she didn't feel like she was holding everything up by herself. Maxwell hadn't tried to take credit. He hadn't barged in. He hadn't demanded anything in return. He had just been there. Silently, steadily. A man who once lived his life behind glass walls, reaching across the distance, not with grand gestures but with quiet faith. She wiped her cheeks, laughing softly through her tears. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Maybe she never had been. The final hearing began under a gray sky that pressed low against the courthouse. Rain pattered against the tall windows, soft and steady, like a heartbeat. Inside the courtroom, the tension was thick. Every glance, every whisper carried weight. Lily sat straight-backed at the table, Daniel Grayson beside her, calm as ever. Across the aisle, Travis lounged with a false air of ease, but his eyes flicked around nervously. His lawyer wore a mask of professionalism, but even he knew the tide had turned. The judge entered, the room rose, then the session began. Travis's side made one final push, rehashing the same tired arguments. Lily's financial instability, the public attention, her relationship with a high-profile figure. But it lacked teeth now. There was no new evidence, no real foundation. And then Daniel stood. "If it pleases the court," he began, "I'd like to submit new documentation regarding Mr. Miller's employment history, housing record, and recent communications that directly contradict his stated intentions." He handed over a thick folder. The judge flipped through it silently. Inside, eviction notices, unemployment records, texts Travis had sent to a former friend, bragging about hitting the jackpot and getting paid to be a dad again. There was even a voicemail, his own voice, laughing as he said, "I don't care about the kid, I care about what she's got now. That Sterling guy, he's loaded." The courtroom went still. Travis's face drained of color. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Your Honor," he said, "this case is not about what Lily Thompson lacks. It's about what she gives. Love, stability, presence. She has raised Ethan alone for 5 years. Not perfectly, but with courage and consistency. And that," he concluded, "is worth more than anything money could ever buy." The judge sat in thoughtful silence for a long moment before finally speaking. "I've reviewed the evidence. I've listened to the arguments. And in the best interest of the child," she paused, glancing toward Lily, "full custody is awarded to the respondent, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Miller's petition is denied." Lily's breath left her in one great shaking exhale. Her hands flew to her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. Ethan, seated quietly behind her with a court-appointed child advocate, jumped to his feet. "Mommy," he shouted, running down the aisle. Lily turned just in time to catch him, as he threw his arms around her neck. "You won," he said. "You're a superhero." Lily laughed through her tears, hugging him tightly. "No, baby, we won." From the back of the courtroom, unseen by most, Maxwell watched quietly from the last row, hands folded, a rare softness in his eyes. He didn't need applause. He didn't need thanks. Just the sight of them, safe together and smiling. That was enough. The Sterling family townhouse was silent, elegant, and perfectly arranged, just as Grace Sterling liked it. Afternoon light filtered through tall windows, catching on crystal and polished wood. She sat in her private sitting room, a cup of untouched Earl Grey cooling beside her, her expression composed as always. Maxwell stood across from her, no longer the guarded, dutiful son she'd sculpted over decades, but something different now. Calmer, firmer, more alive. "I spoke with the board this morning," Grace said, folding her hands neatly. "They've accepted the new restructuring plan." "Good," Maxwell replied. It's time they realized I'm not building this company for them. She gave him a long, quiet look. You've changed. I've found something worth changing for. There was a pause. Grace, always so quick to counter to correct, simply sat with that. I saw the footage from the courthouse, she said at last. You were there. Maxwell didn't deny it. She didn't know. But you did it anyway. He met her gaze. Because she didn't need a rescue, she needed someone who wouldn't walk away. Grace inhaled slowly. I spent most of your life trying to mold you into something powerful, unshakable. You did, he said gently. I was wrong. Her voice barely wavered. Whatever you found with her, it puts light in your eyes again. I'd almost forgotten what that looked like. Maxwell blinked, surprised. But Grace simply stood, smoothed her jacket, and said with quiet finality, If you choose her, Maxwell, I won't stand in your way. He gave a small nod. Thank you. That evening, the sky over Brooklyn was streaked with lavender and gold. Lily stood on the fire escape outside her apartment, sipping tea from a chipped mug, the city breathing softly around her. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. Maxwell appeared at the bottom of the stairwell, looking up. No coat, no entourage, just him and that quietly intense gaze she'd once found infuriating. She didn't say anything, just watched as he climbed the steps one by one. He stopped in front of her, no speech, no excuses. Just hi. Lily tilted her head. Thought you were done showing up on fire escapes. I'm not here to fix anything, he said. Not this time. She looked at him, guarded but curious. I'm here to ask, he continued, if I can be part of it, your life, Ethan, not to save you, just to be there, as long as you'll let me. Her throat tightened. You sure you're built for messy? I'm learning, he said softly. And it turns out I like messy, especially when it laughs like him and looks like you. A smile tugged at her lips, unbidden. You're not going to magically make everything easier. I know. We don't live in a penthouse. Good, he said. I prefer your view. She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. Come in, she whispered. And just like that, Maxwell Sterling, man of numbers, walls, and impossible standards, stepped into the beautiful, chaotic, real world of Lily and Ethan. This time, not as a visitor, but as someone who'd finally found home. The sun dipped low behind the trees of Central Park, painting the sky in strokes of amber and rose. The same park where it all began, where coffee had spilled, papers had flown, and lives had quietly shifted on an ordinary day. Now laughter echoed across the grass. Ethan darted between the trees, a blur of denim and joy, chasing after a paper kite that had long since given up on flying but still made him feel like a superhero. His laughter rang out, bright and boundless. On a nearby bench, Lily sat with her hands folded in her lap, the breeze playing with loose strands of her hair. Next to her, Maxwell leaned back, more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, his coat folded beside him, sleeves rolled up, the weight he'd once carried so visibly now softened at the edges. Their hands rested between them. Close, not quite laced, but touching, just enough to know they were no longer worlds apart. It's strange, Lily said softly, watching Ethan run. How much can change in a few months? Maxwell nodded, and how little too. She smiled, still the same park. Still the same boy, he added. Still the same woman who calls me out when I'm being an idiot. She glanced sideways at him. You're easier to call out now. I'm trying. They sat in silence for a while, letting the sound of the city and the rhythm of their breaths fill the space between words. Then without preamble, Maxwell turned to her, his voice low and steady. Between the world I built and the one I never saw coming, he paused, eyes on hers. I choose you. Lily didn't blink, didn't speak. She simply leaned her head gently against his shoulder, and their fingers finally, fully intertwined. In the distance, Ethan shouted, "Look, I found a dragon rock." And both of them laughed. There were no grand promises, no perfect endings. Just three people on a bench in a park, under a sky that had seen them break and bend and begin again. And somewhere in that quiet, imperfect moment, everything felt possible.